Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it is both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of inspiring you, giving you a specific takeaway, all in the hopes that your journey can be at least a little bit easier. Now, before I fully dive into everything, I would love to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already, that we get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly means a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So, if you've been tracking these vlogs, the main thing that I've been working on creatively is this project that's an animated feature, right? It's designed eventually to be a trilogy of movies, but obviously I'm working on the one right now, starting with the one. And, much in the same way, it's weird in the sense that, The Matrix was always designed to be a trilogy, but the first one is essentially standalone. And in fact, a lot of people just want to watch that one and forget 2 and 3. Conversely, you look at something like Lord of the Rings, the first one, and or just any of those movies, right? They are part of a greater whole. And though thematically, the movies, quote unquote, end, it's not like if you watch Fellowship of the Ring, it is, 100% satisfactory. It's not a complete thought because it goes on. And so that's kind of, in part of the battle with what I'm working on. And if anything, it'll be more akin to Fellowship of the Ring, where it's quite obvious that'll continue, versus The Matrix, which was much more of a standalone, A, B to C, sort of Joseph Campbell hero's journey type of a story. Anyway, that's all precursor to this past Monday. I had a wonderful story check-in meeting with my friends AJ as well as John Comerford. And AJ, he's more of a tech person, and he's been helping me out in terms of, figuring out how this will be part of a larger thing with an NFT component and have collectibles and rewards and stuff like that. But mainly the primary aspect of it is none of it happens without a good story, right? And so of course that's what I'm having to focus on first and foremost. And AJ is someone who loves anime and kind of wanted to sit in on a story session, and just hear all about this. And John and I were essentially going over, I had rewritten about 50 pages of the first draft into now the second draft. And so John and I were discussing essentially how good those pages were, what still needed to be reworked, and so forth. And as it continues, right, the whole process is about 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And, it's funny, the way I number my drafts is based on whether I complete one, and then versions within that. So for example, technically this is the second draft, although it's I'm on version 6, right? So it took me 13 versions to get to a official first draft. So that's kind of how I operate, if you will, at least, right now for this project. But, we ended up talking for about 2 hours. And the good news is we're now getting into the real nitty gritty. So it's good, because before we were talking a lot of macro stuff. And now we can get into more specifics of dialogue, certain actions, feeling unmotivated, and so forth, because we're getting closer and closer to where we need to and want to be, right? And which is exciting. So that's been a fun aspect. And so this week after that, I've been revising those pages, the notes. Some of it was simple enough where it was like a typo and I could fix it right there in the moment. Other stuff, required more work. And the fun part for me is John himself is actually going to take a stab at 3 scenes himself and let me see them and kind of just overall, if it works, it works. If it not. But I'm sure overall it'll work. And the stuff that doesn't work, it'll spark enough ideas for me to, okay, here's how I want to approach it, right? So that's been my approach to this. And, part of it is simplifying the story. That's a big component of this, making sure that, audiences know what the hell's going on and things like that. But, something that I've been talking with John about is, for me, like, at the end of the day, I'm okay to throw out, I have this gut feeling that, I'm okay if we throw a lot at the audience every now and then, as long as internally it makes sense. Whereas before, in the earlier drafts, things happened and they didn't make sense, and they didn't make sense because, quite frankly, like, even with the knowledge of myself as the storyteller, there was no logic behind them, right? But if there is an internal logic for why things happen, I'm okay to, I'll default to trusting the audience that they'll understand it versus not. It's almost like a Christopher Nolan movie. There's so much thrown in there, and sometimes it's overwhelming, but when you revisit it and really examine it, it makes sense, right? And so I'm okay with it. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that I'm just going to throw everything but the kitchen sink. I do think, John is obviously very correct. The reason why I love him is because this is his bread and butter. He knows storytelling from start to finish. And so, the more, it's that adage, the simpler a story can be, the more richer it can be, because you can show point and counterpoint and so forth. So it's, I'm sure in the end it will be a delicate balance act between, my desire to have so many things within the story itself, but also paring it down so that way the stuff that I do want to shine through really resonates, as opposed to being lost in the fog of it all. So, it's a constant battle, if you will, in that sense. And my objective for this week is to get through the rest of the script, which might be pretty ambitious, but I'm trying to prioritize time and so forth. Anything not going towards work, that I need to do will be going into this. And so I'm excited for that. Plus, we have the long weekend with, 4th of July and stuff like that. So I think it'll be overall doable to some degree. I mean, at least there's the opportunity to do it, right? But I've talked about this before. The act of writing can be slow for me, and especially now when I am in the minutia, certain things, it's like, okay, let me now, like, I have something to work off of, but it's like, okay, I know what needs to be said, like the subtext of it, but how do I say it in a much cleaner way, right? Whether it's dialogue, whether it's the writing of the script and stuff like that. So it's all a balancing act, it really is, and this is the joy of writing, So something, moving on from that, and something that's completely different that I wouldn't normally do. My friend Daryl Kristen invited me to be part of our friend Leo Kionis's sort of Hollywood tour, right? There's a lot of tours in LA that do this. You get on a bus or a van and you tour Hollywood. Well, our friend Leo Kionis, aka Film Freak, he started this Film Freak movie locations tour, which is down in Hollywood, or more specifically West Hollywood, and yeah, you essentially you ride in this van, and he gives you the history of all these various locations, and then he plays clips from movies where these locations have been used and stuff like that. And it was just a fun experience to be a tourist in my own city, essentially. And, rarely do we take that opportunity. I mean, there's so many people, for example, in New York that have never visited the Statue of Liberty, right? Even though it's there in their own backyard. And so I think it's important every now and then to take that step back and to learn one's history of where they live, right? This is my sort of backyard and whatnot. And also too, like what I was saying to them was oftentimes like when I visit, anywhere really in LA, most of the time I'm going somewhere, and unless there's like a need, for business or pleasure, most of the time I'm just passing through various locations and so forth and trying to get there on time. Or of course, just by the act of driving, you're not taking the time to receive in their fullness, like your surroundings, right? And this was just an ability to not have to drive, to have a more reflective look upon these neighborhoods and to see all of it. And being in the van, it's an open window van, right? Meaning it doesn't have windows. It's one of those like safari-esque type of vans. And, you're driving by all these places and you get the full effect of all the smells of these restaurants and stuff like that. And all of a sudden you become hungry. So it was a really neat experience. And if you're ever in LA, the Film Freak movie locations tour is a lot of fun. You're not just visiting celebrity homes, like you're visiting locations that are iconic in Hollywood. Now, do you have to do that? No, there's of course other stuff, but if nothing, the greater sort of takeaway is try to do some stuff that are local to you, do like local tourism in your own city. If you live in LA, do some LA stuff, but regardless of, you can live in wherever, Chicago, Seattle, New York, Boston, and anywhere in between, right? Dallas, doesn't matter, like whatever big city, small city, town, just get to know your surroundings a little bit more, and from that tourist perspective, I think there's real value in that. So I think that's a big takeaway for me, even beyond just talking about this tour specifically. As far as anything else, other stuff that has been on my mind is this notion that I see a lot of articles on loneliness, right? We talk about like the loneliness epidemic, yet there's not a lot of articles on how to form friendships and how to be friends with people, right? Like we don't examine that aspect of it. We just are, not that there's anything wrong with identifying the problem. Obviously that's a first step towards anything in terms of solutions, but then we don't talk about the next steps as far as this is concerned. And so it's just been interesting. And it's been on my mind in that way because, I think all relationships require effort, of you, of the other person. I think, I've said it before, ideals, right? We got to stop looking, like friendship, right? We look at it as a noun, but it's really a verb. Love can be viewed as, a noun, but instead it should be a verb, right? Like you have to put an action towards these things, otherwise you are not them. Being courageous, well, how do you show courageousness, right? Having talent, well, how do you display that talent? You have to do it through action, aka verbs. And so, I think that's how we need to approach like friendship and even this is just a very banal sort of viewpoint of it. But that's why, like, for me, yes, we talk about the loneliness aspect of it, but what are ways people can enhance their friendships, right? Like, I would love to have more of those conversations. And that's why, like, I mean, just going back to, this Hollywood tour, it was wonderful because, it's me and my friend Daryl doing something that neither of us would normally do. And so it enriches our friendship in a way that, is beyond just the typical, hey, let's go out for happy hour and catch up type of thing. Like it gave us something new to talk about. And, that's that's wonderful for our friendship. So, I think there's tons of ways to approach this, but I think that's the conversation we need to be having, as opposed to, okay, people are lonely. Well, how do we resolve that? What steps can be taken to enhance the friendships that we have, to formulate other new friendships, based on interests and values and so forth? That's very important. So I thought I'd throw that out there, but I always encourage you all to comment or reach out to me on social media at Phil Svitek to discuss any of the things that, I make mention of. But specifically, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, of take it as a two-parter. How to maintain friendships, like ideas for that, and also how to form new friendships. I would love to hear your perspectives, thoughts, activities on this, because I think it's obviously worthwhile, to really reflect upon and eventually act upon. And I think the more of us that put our brain power towards that concept, the more results and success we can have, right? Like with anything. So, and then the last thing, I talked about it in my last vlog, but officially this past week on June 20th was the 1-year anniversary of a Bogota trip premiering, which was exciting. I just kind of posted old, pictures and clips from that day, interviews that we'd done, the Q&A after the screening, and various thoughts on that. So it was good for me to just reflect upon that. We don't take the opportunity to appreciate our successes. Today, at the time of the taping, we're going to do a dinner with the people that are in LA. Everyone kind of, like always, right? Everyone ends up being busy and doing all kinds of exciting new things, which is wonderful to see, but in that sense, it's a shame, unfortunately, that we can't get the whole LA band back together, just for a fun dinner. And of course, just even that would leave out other people, like Jonathan Moulton, for example, is from Nashville. Someone else is from San Francisco. And then, of course, my two major components of the whole movie are in Colombia. So it's never going to be a full, session of people. But I think it's always, talking about friendships and how to maintain relationships. I think it's important, to check in with people and things like that. In fact, I was talking with my fellow filmmaker, Jeff Graham, and, he essentially said, hey, Phil, I appreciate you always kind of keeping us in the loop on various things. And, because most people don't, and so forth. And I thanked him, and unfortunately, what I had looped us in on was sad news for one of our friends that we cared deeply about, and I won't say what it is, but because it's a personal matter. But all the same, I think it's important to share and keep people abreast of the good and the bad, right? And this was an instance where it was something very, let's say, tragic, something sad. And I was notified of it, and I know the person, they're sort of overwhelmed, and, so I let other people that I know are friends with him, that, they care deeply about this person. I said, hey, here's what's going on, blah, 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 just wanted to let you know, and kind of, let them take it from there. But just, if not, just to show solidarity and be there for comfort and stuff like that. And so, Jeff was one of those people that I reached out to and said, hey, here's kind of what's going on with this person. And so Jeff responded back, hey, he was like, I appreciate you always, keeping us together in that way, through the good and the bad, and both are equal, right? I mean, it's obviously we would love to have only good news, weddings, babies, successful projects, tons of money, whatever it is, vacations, blah, blah, blah. We would love all that. But it's, unfortunately, life is life, and we go through various ebbs and flows, and people need us to be there for them, and it's tough to, when you're in that particular moment dealing with the hardships, A, you're in the thick of it, and B, to reach out to somebody, like, it feels like you're asking too much of other people. And so, just kind of taking on that responsibility and then letting people step up in that sort of special way, to me, is important, right? Again, as I'm talking about it and putting it all together, this is what friendship in a way is all about. Back when John Wick 4 came out, I did a whole episode in and of itself, and I promise I'm not spoiling John Wick 4, but there was a wonderful quote in there that says, "Friendship means nothing if it's convenient." And, this is an aspect of that. Like, it's easy to be there for somebody in the good, although sometimes people get jealous, and that's not a good thing. But, you also got to be there for when people are going through tough times and stuff like that. So, that's how you maintain and deepen these various friendships. So, that's kind of what's been going on in my world, not perhaps all that exciting or lengthy to talk about, but, something, as mentioned, the act of writing, as I said, is not glamorous when you're, just observing it, but the final product, the aim of it is to be, something engaging. And the only way you do that is through tons and tons of hours of work, And so I'm continuing on with that. And just slowly and surely getting towards a finish line, no different than any of the books, the movies, and stuff like that I've done. And on a personal note, even just I had a chance to also kind of hang out with various people in my life. I talked about Daryl, but also one of the things that's always special to me is sharing the Matrix with friends who have never seen it before. And so my friends, Howie and Fern Ronay, they had, Howie's seen the movie back when it came out, but I hadn't watched it since, and Fern's never seen it. And so we did like a dinner together and then watched it. It was just a blast. I love doing that. And for me, it's always great to revisit it. So that's, I guess, another way that, I enrich the friendships in my life. So thank you, as always, for taking the time to tune in. I truly do appreciate you. If you like what I'm doing and would love to support me, patreon.com/PhilSvitek is a way to do that. Not only is it an awesome means of supporting me, but it's more of a direct way for us to interact and for me to be able to help you out if you think I can. If that's something you're interested in, there's only one tier. It's $10 a month. So, it's just simplified that way. It's clean. I like it. And it's not too much money, ultimately. So, that's available to you, but not required. Anyway, thank you so much. I hope to see you next time.